All right, everybody, we are going to talk about data collection. So just a quick overview on how we do a lot of different kinds of data collection. And as you advance in your career, you will choose the data collection that makes the most sense to you, or you'll develop a new system that works best for you. But here is just your very first kind of introduction to a few options that you have. Here is our table of contents, what we're going to go into. So you'll see that we're going to talk about types of prompting first, and that is going to be really critical because if you don't know how to do your types of prompting, then data collection isn't going to make any sense. So you have to take data on the types of prompts you're using as well. And so we want to make sure that we know what those are. And so we'll do a quick review of that and then go through a few different ways to take data. So the different types of prompting that we have, we will start with cues versus prompts. So in the state of California, we do not differentiate between cues and prompts, but just so you know, semantically, what are cues versus prompts? So prompts are these more direct kind of things designed to lead the client to the correct response, whereas cues are more subtle. These are considered to be hints. So in California, you're going to hear those used interchangeably, a cue versus a prompt. But in the state of Texas, for example, if you are in litigation and you have mixed these up, use these interchangeably, are given a cue when you said you'd give a prompt or vice versa, this could cause a lot of issues. So you do want to be aware of this. If you leave the state of California or whatever state you're working in, you need to know what are the laws for my state so that I know, am I cueing or am I prompting? But here in California where we are, these are going to be used very interchangeably, but I do want you to have it in the back of your mind that they are actually different. So here are some prompts, and here I did it immediately where I called it prompts, and then look, we're calling it cues here, and we even said prompts and cues kind of together. Again, that's a California thing. That's okay in California. It's not going to be okay everywhere. Okay, so we know what verbal cues are, right? We know when we're trying to lead a client to the answer, we might say, remember to use the sound that we're working on right now. And your client should know that because we've front-loaded them, right? So we've told them this is what we're working on. This is the sound that we're trying to target right now. What you're not going to do, so for example, if you're working on your sound, you're not going to say, remember to use your sound, because what you have just done is actually a model. And modeling is giving the direct response or giving the exact thing you want your client to do. We don't want to model necessarily if that's not the level of prompting that they need. If they're at the level where they need that level of prompting, that's great. Some people need a model. So we have brand new aphasic patients or brand new TBI clients or early intervention kiddos where they need that model, really are dependent on that model in order to be successful. Then you give them that model. But we know that, right? Because we've done dynamic assessment, because we've looked at our data, we're helping our clients. So we know whether they need the model or not. Okay, visuals and gesturals. So remember visual, we can have a static visual. So a static visual will stay put. That's going to stay on the table, the wall, or wherever you want that to be. So static visuals will stay put versus our transient visuals. A transient visual will move and it will only be ready and available for our client when they need that transient visual. Gestural cues, and here this is something that I got off the internet, these particular types of prompts. I wouldn't necessarily put gestural cues and visual together, but in this particular chart they did. So we have a hand gesture where you might be pointing to something or kind of guiding the client. That would be your gestural cues, but you're not actually touching them. That's different from your tactile cues where you're actually putting hands on the client. Please be cautious with this one. Some type of tactile cue that you could have is prompt, and that is literally prompt is the name of a very specific approach to therapy, and you have to be trained in that. So if you're not trained in that, you cannot do prompt therapy. And remember, in the public schools, depending on where you live, there could be very strict rules about whether you're allowed to use prompt, and more often than not, you are not allowed to touch a child. So in private practice and hospitals, this might be a little bit different, but always make sure you know the policies where you're working. It is really, really critical that you do not use physical touching for prompt purposes unless you are permitted to do that. So always check with those. Written and phonemic cues, we've kind of talked about these, even our articulatory cues, literally what they sound like. So we're giving written instructions, we're giving a phonemic cue like "ba" in order to elicit "ball," or an articulatory placement. So where we're saying like, remember to keep your tongue between your teeth if, for example, they're targeting that sound. So we might want to say, give them just that little placement cue. Environmental cues, kids have a lot in classrooms, right? So that's just stuff that's been put up on the walls in order to help them. And then indirect and direct verbal, pretty straightforward. We're kind of asking a question to guide versus a direct prompt where we're saying like, okay, remember that what's the next thing in a sequence, for example, if we're working on sequencing. Here they do have gestural prompts again. I know they're already up at the top, but again, it's just kind of gesturing towards, pointing towards, and indicating to kind of help. This is particularly helpful with maybe following directions, or if you're trying to get them to complete a homework assignment. And then the final one here, physical assistance. I really, really, really want to caution us on this. Hand over hand guidance is really not ideal because this is not our client doing it. This is us doing it. So I always like to help my clients, particularly my AAC clients, maybe the first time I'll ask them, and anytime, this is really, really important. Really important. Always, always, always ask before you touch a client. And so I always will say, even though I am prompt certified, so this one I do, and I get hired specifically to do prompt therapy with children. It does not matter if the child knows that. I always ask before every time I touch that child's face. I will always say, can I help you with this? And I have a little gesture that I show my kids, and they know that. And if they say no, I do not touch them. Body autonomy is critical. So you must always ask before you touch a client's face, tongue, jaw. I probably won't be touching their tongue. Maybe you will. I don't know. Please wear gloves if you are. And that before touching any part of our client, even if it's like a hand guidance, you always ask if you can help them. So if we're doing hand over hand, I will hold out my hand. I'll say, can I help you with this? If the client gives me their hand, I'll guide their hand to where the spot is on a particular AAC. But I really try to only do that maybe max 3 times in a session, because really at that point, again, I'm doing it, not the client. So there are some people who are going to tell you there are hierarchies of prompts and that they're stuck in a particular way. There are hierarchies of prompts, but I need us to be very, very cautious here. Hierarchies of prompts are specific to the goal that you are targeting, okay? So that's really, really critical. Hierarchies of prompts are specific to the goal that you are targeting, because if you are targeting following directions, then this full physical prompt is going to be the most amount of support that you can give them, right? Like physically guiding them. However, if you are, let's say, targeting a particular sound in articulation, you could do a full physical prompt, but also modeling that sound. So if you actually tell them, this is the sound that we're trying to do, put your teeth here, and you're literally walking them through the articulatory placement, and then you're telling them, giving them the option of the sound, then it's not a full physical prompt, because you can't actually get in there and force their tongue up to where it belongs. That's not possible, right? So you need to be aware that there are hierarchies of prompting, but that hierarchy of prompting shifts depending on what the goal is that you're targeting. Full physical prompt is not going to work if we're having a client, let's say, write an email because they're trying to get back to work. What would be a much higher level of prompting for them is if you wrote the email for them and had them copy the email down. That's a model, right? So please keep that in mind, that yes, this is one hierarchy that you could have, but I do want to put, this is only one example, and that will change. So it will change based on your goal, right? Based on the goal. It's not always going to be in this order. So what you have to ask yourself is, when you write the goal, what would be the most amount of support to where basically I'm doing this for the client. And that might be a model, that might be copying, which again would be a model. It might be a full physical prompt, and so forth and so on. So always asking yourself, because you need to know the hierarchy so you can pick appropriate step ups and step downs, which we talked about in a different lecture. But you might need to review that if you don't remember those, but you want to make sure we're picking the right one for stepping up and stepping down. Okay, so let's get into how we take data. So rubrics are one of my favorite ways to take data, especially for older clients, middle school, high school, and adults. And the reason why, as you will see, is it gives them a lot of variability. So specifically, this is really good for like advanced writing skills, and that's what this particular rubric is written for. So if we have, let's say, a high schooler who is trying to get into college, or we're working on assignments for class, and we're working on those more advanced writing skills. So this would be like your gen ed classroom kid who is trying to get into college but still comes to see you for support, we can give them a rubric. So we're not just saying, did you write a really great paragraph or did you not, yes or no, because it's not so cut and dry, because we have to think about things like grammar and spelling, and is it organized, and did they stay on topic, and did they give the right amount of details or the right details in general. So please notice that we do want to be really cautious, and just some minor things that you might not necessarily notice, but we never, ever give a 0 on a rubric. We always want a kid, if we're using this for an adult too, we always want our clients to feel like they're making progress, like they're doing okay. So even if we did each one of these, let's say like it really isn't that well of a paragraph, this kid is still going to get 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. They're still going to get a 5 on this particular rubric. So for that particular day, for that paper, they got a 5 versus a 0. I know. Side note, probably some of you are like, okay, Dr. B, like, how about you give us 5s for our rubrics and no 0s for ours? Not the same in college. It's a little bit different for college. But for our clients, we do want to make sure that we're being cautious of that. So a little bit different with grading versus taking data. But I do want to just acknowledge that for sure. So rubrics, what you'll do is you're going to design this rubric however it makes the most sense to you. So what are the things that you're trying to get your client to target? This also could be really great for emails for our older clients. So if they're trying to make an email, even if you're trying to do a resume for a client. So a client is trying to get a job or trying to go back to work or whatever it is that our clients might be trying to do, we can create rubrics. And this is really good, particularly for goals where there are a lot of moving parts. So we can write a goal that's a little bit more advanced, but we're able to kind of hit on all these different moving parts. So I love rubrics. I think they're amazing. And what you'll do is you'll actually put this into your goal, like as measured by a rubric provided. And you can use these in schools. These totally hold up in a court of law. Actually, they're super great for courts of law, just to be honest, but you want to make sure that they're written really, really well. So I'm sure you could be critical of this one. I should have put an AI generated. As you all know, I love AI. So this is an AI generated one. I just gave AI the parameters. So you could even have AI create the rubrics for you. So I just told Copilot, I said, think like a speech language pathologist, create a rubric that covers spelling, grammar, organization, topic maintenance, and details, and give me the rubric for data collection. And this is what AI put out for me. So again, this is from Copilot. And Copilot generated this for me. So you could make some edits to this. There are some things where you could say, okay, what does it mean to have generally clear instructions? Some things that you for sure could pick apart, but just wanted you to have some kind of an example for yourselves to see rubrics. Love rubrics, think they're awesome, couldn't advocate more for them. The next thing we're going to look at is tally marks. I'm going to just say straight up, I am not a fan of tally marks. I don't think they give us enough data because they don't let us know if the client has prompts or cues. And also with rubrics, let's go back real quick. With rubrics, we also don't necessarily know if the client had prompts or cues. So you would just need to make sure that you're taking notes to say like, okay, is this independent writing or not? And for this particular one, we really are looking for independent writing, right? Because this is our advanced writing skills. So what can the client do on their own? So this is that independent level. This is not really prompting for rubrics. Now, what you could do is, again, you could add in, so like they did it independently. They did it with minimal verbal prompting, they did, right? And you could just add those particular ones in and put that on your rubric. For this one though, this would be expected to be independent work. Okay, back to tallies. So I don't love tallies because it is a lot harder to kind of get at what was it done, like how many particular times did they have the opportunity to do this, or was there any prompting available? But here's one example of how you could do tallies. So tallies are more just like yes or no. Tallies also could be used in stuttering. So was a stutter there or not? But again, we also want to be really cautious that we really want to promote positivity around stuttering and not necessarily telling our clients not to stutter. That's not ethical. Our clients are stutterers. And so we want them to stutter, but we want them to obviously be stuttering in the most natural way possible. You have a whole class on that. We're not going to get into that for today. But here's an example of using tallies. So here is where you might want to say, okay, we're going to use a tally in the instance where it's like yes or no, it happened or it didn't happen. And what you'll see is I have all these different opportunities. So this is just a partially written goal. This is not a good goal. So not well written. I just want to like point that out. This is only a partial goal. Okay, this is only partial, not a fully written goal. So the client will produce the initial "d" independently at the sentence level. So here's one sentence, and the client did it 3 times. Here's a second sentence. The client did it, let me scooch in here. The client did it 4 times. Here's the third sentence. They did it once. But what you're probably going to ask is, okay, what were the number of opportunities? So you could set up your tallies a different way. So like I had 10 opportunities. So I could have, those 10 boxes. Here were my 10 opportunities. Let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So 2, 4, 6, 8, 10. Okay. So we have 10 opportunities. Client got it, didn't, got it, got it, got it. They didn't get it, got it, got it, got it, got it. So in the 10 opportunities, we had 8 out of 10 in which the client was able to get the sound. That's one way to do it. You also could just be like tallies. Every time you hear it, you make a tally mark. I would recommend that you do it this way, much easier to count if you're going to use tallies. But again, I'm not a super fan of using them. I don't think they're necessarily that helpful, but you can probably come up with ideas on when tallies would be really, really helpful. But that's just how you could do it. The client gets it, they don't do it. How many times are they doing this during a particular session? So that's your tally marks. X's and checks, pluses and minuses, these can be used interchangeably. So literally like check, X, plus, minus. You got it or you didn't get it, right? And so pretty straightforward. You have your goals. So what's the goal that we're trying to get? You got it here. Look, you got all these pluses. That's great. Here is where you've prompted the child. So good job, they've got it prompted. Here is where they did not get it. So this is an example. I got this off this website. This is just somebody else's. I do not like to use checks and X's. So again, you could do check, check. Yes, we got the Z in the initial position at sentence level. Check, check. Nope, we didn't get it a couple of times. We missed it. And then we kind of got it a few more times and then didn't. We have our S blends. That would be the same. Okay, but what I do not like about this is my personal opinion, and we all know what I think about opinions. So personally, I don't like these because it is easy for a client to look over your shoulder, to see over your clipboard, or to even watch your hand, and they can quickly see if they're getting pluses or minuses. And a lot of the times, this can be very challenging for our clients if they see that they're not doing well. Additionally, if you're not very specific about the type of prompt that you're using, so see here, it doesn't even say what kind of prompt you're using. You need to make sure that if you're going to put that P for prompt, that you make it very clear that this was a minimal verbal prompting, right? That this was minimal verbal prompting is what I'm going to use on this goal, on this particular spot, and make sure that if it changes throughout the session, that you're being very clear, like, okay, I did a different prompt here. So like P might equal minimal verbal versus P circle might equal a visual, or however you want to do yours, whatever makes the most sense to you. I don't love it because I think it makes it challenging to figure out the type of prompting, but also I think it's very deflating to clients if they're constantly seeing you do this, right? And your pencil is pretty clear, even if you think that you're not. There's a big difference between doing pluses, and especially if you're taking it on an iPad, it makes noise. So anyway, just things to think about, but that's plus and minus. You got it, you didn't get it. Straightforward, yes or no. All right. The next one we want to talk about is self-monitoring. And this is really straightforward. I give my clients a piece of paper and a pencil, and I say, I want you to take your own data. You can give yourself pluses and checks. I don't care if you want to give yourself smiley faces or sad faces, whatever you want to do. And you're going to monitor yourself, and you're going to take your own data. So you as the clinician need to take data as well, while your client is also self-monitoring. And then you compare your data. You could also give your client a clicker. So I had a student who we were working on finishing a thought and not interrupting ourselves and restarting a phrase. So for example, he would say a sentence like, well, I went to the store, I went to the grocery store, I went to the grocery store yesterday to buy some treats. I went to the grocery store yesterday to buy some watermelon, right? So he did that a lot, where he would just stop rather than just clarifying or giving himself some pauses. He would restart his sentence altogether. So what I had him do once he got to this point, and in order to generalize the skill, is I would have him self-monitor. So I gave him a clicker, and I would tell him every time you catch yourself like going back and restarting your sentence, do me a favor and just click it on the clicker, so that he could self-monitor. So again, it's making him aware of, oh, look, I am going back, but it gives him that physical reminder. So that's one thing. You can have him write it down on a piece of paper. In my experience, a lot of the times my clients are actually more critical of themselves than they should be. And I think our adult clients do that a lot. And even our kids do it too. So just self-monitoring is an option, but always make sure you're taking your own data, comparing it with the client. And this is a great generalization skill as well, because it's teaching them how to generalize the skill so that they can monitor when you're not around. All right, one more. We're going to talk about my silly way of how I collect data. So yes, this is an intentionally blank page because we're going to work on this. And this might not make a ton of sense right out the gate. We will continue to look at this as this class progresses. But this is the way I was taught to take data. I have yet to have any client who has figured it out because of the way that the data collection works. I really like it because it is very straightforward to me once I've practiced. Now, truth be told, it took me a long time. I had to practice for a long time in order to get this down. And now I love it. It's my favorite way to collect data. So I will teach you using an articulation. So we're going to look at articulation goal. And let's say that we want our client to produce the sound, and we want them to do that in the initial position at the word level. And our goal, as of right now, is for that client to have minimal verbal prompting. That's the goal. And that's the target for the week. So our target for this week is for my client to produce the sound in the initial position of words with minimal verbal prompting. So we have words like sock, soap, sand. Let's leave it at that. We'll start with 3. So here are the different symbols that you're going to see. So you're going to see symbols just like this in mine, just so that you know, but I'm going to explain what these mean. So let's say I show my client a picture of a sock. I do not say a word. I literally put the picture on the table and the client says sock, and they produce it all by themselves. Like I haven't said anything to the client. Or if the client walks in and says, look at my new sock, Miss Leah, that is going to be spontaneous. I have not asked the child to do anything. The child just says the sound on their own. That's going to be an S. So that's one data point. The child does it spontaneously. They say sock and they get it. Let's say I show the picture of the sock, point to my sock, or in some way indicate a sock and ask the child, what is this? And the child says sock. And they produce the sound independently. They don't need any help. I'm going to give them an I for independence. All right. So their goal is saying that they can have minimal verbal prompting. So right now the S and the I is above the goal level. So this means they're performing above their goal level. But let's say I show my kid a picture of a sock and the kid says sock. They do that frontal lisping. And I say, ooh, can we try that again? Right? Now, remember, I have front loaded. I've done a teaching time. They know what we're working on. They know we're targeting that sound to keep the tongue behind the teeth or keep the bear in the cage, however you've taught them the S, right? So I say, oh, can we try that again? And this time, the child does produce it correctly. But as soon as they say it incorrectly, I am immediately going to make a line on my paper to indicate I gave them the opportunity to say this word, but it was not said correctly. So now I give them that minimal verbal prompting, and let's say they get it. They've got it right away. So I said, oh, can we try again? The kid immediately retracts that tongue and says, sock. Now I'm going to put a line the opposite direction, indicating that the child was able to get the sound, but this time it was with a prompt. So this is a prompted production of the sound. Now, I'm going through my data, right? And let's say I'm looking at my data and I see a lot of these. This is indicating that even when given the prompt, the client was not able to produce the sound. And let's say I have a lot of these in my data. And right now I'm trying with minimal verbal prompting. That's what I'm trying with. If my data are showing that even with minimal verbal prompting, my client is not able to get it because I have a lot of these, right? So this is saying I've got all these trials where even with that prompting, that child is not getting what I want. This is indicating to me that I need to step this down. We need to go down because this kid needs more help. So what I will do is I will literally make an indication, whether an arrow or a line, either one, in my data to show I have changed the level of prompting. And then I'm going to give a visual or give some kind of note on how I change that prompting. So let's say I switch the client now to prompt. So prompt, which is the one I'm certified in. Remember, you can't do this if you are not certified. So I go to prompt. So I've made a note here. And let's say as soon as I do prompt, I show them a picture of some soap, and the child says soap. I do prompt on them. I say, may I help you with that sound? I actually put my hands on their articulators, help them say soap, and they get it. So they said soap with a TH, so that would be an indication we didn't get it. May I help you with that word? The kid says yes. We do prompt. The kid gets it. That's awesome. So we go through, let's say they get a couple more, but then they miss a few. Now remember, they got them, but I had to use prompt here. This is with the prompt. And I used prompt, all capital P prompt. Sorry, I probably should have picked something else. But then we have a few sporadic in here where they don't get it. Then they do get it. Maybe they get an independent one. Then we're playing and we get a spontaneous one. But what I'm seeing here is a mixture. So ones that where they needed prompt. Even with prompt, they were not able to get it. They've got an independent. They've got a spontaneous. This is what we want our data to look like. Our data should look like this, where it's a mixture of things going on. If we see a lot of independent or a lot of spontaneous, that means that goal needs to be scaffolded up. We're giving them too much help. That means that goal is probably good to go. Like this client, not scaffolding up because it's independent or spontaneous. They might be finished with this goal, right? They might not need this goal anymore, and they might be finished with targeting this goal. If that's all my data indicate is the independent and the spontaneous. If we're seeing a lot of this in my way of collecting data, this means that they're getting it every single time I'm prompting them. So we might need to scaffold up because this means they don't need that level of support anymore. So maybe they're ready to move up to independence. And now I want to know, are we independently getting this? In which case, then my data are going to change, right? So I would have more of these than maybe some independence because I'm not prompting. Or if I had to prompt, maybe we'll see. I prompted a few here. But if we're targeting independence, we want to see more independence than anything else. But they still might need some prompting. But the mix is always going to be better than the same thing over and over again. If we're looking down at our data and our data show that we're getting the same thing over and over again, something needs to give. Either it's time to move on from that goal, or what you're giving them is too easy or too hard, and we need to adjust. And it's really, really critical. And this is why we talked about in lesson plans, it is really, really critical that you are paying attention to your data and that you've put your step ups and step downs in there. So you know, you can look at that lesson plan and you say, oh, I can quickly shift to a step up or I can quickly shift to a step down and help my client to be able to be more successful. So this might be a little bit crazy. You're right thinking, oh my gosh, Dr. B, like this is nuts. Like, I don't think I can do this. We'll practice this in class. You don't have to use this particular approach to data collection. I love it. It makes sense to me because it's telling me what kind of prompt I'm using. Is it independent? Is it spontaneous? Was it prompted? Was it unprompted? And all those sorts of things. But we'll go over it some more, but that's just your introduction. So I want you to think about what questions you have. Think about your questions. Bring those to class. We'll practice data collection. And I will see you all very soon.